Shop the Plato's Closet Black Friday event in North Charleston and West Ashley and let the deals begin. You know Plato's Closet always has a huge selection of trendy recycled styles at amazing prices, but Black Friday deals are different. They're better. We've been holding back some of our best inventory, and you won't want to miss our Black Friday event. Save on gently used styles from Patagonia, Lululemon, Lilly Pulitzer, and hundreds of popular brands. Plato's Closet is ready to let the Black Friday deals begin. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Today's show is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your online activity today and find out how you can get 3 months free at tryexpressvpn.com/space. That's tryexpressvpn.com/space for 3 months free with a 1-year package. Visit tryexpressvpn.com/space to learn more.
15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 10, 9, ignition sequence start.
Space Nuts.
5, 4, 3, 2.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Space Nuts.
Astronauts report it feels good.
Hello once again, and thank you for joining us on the podcast we call Space Nuts. That's because we're nuts about space, the space between our ears. But we're also nuts about the space up and around us, and it goes off into infinity. And joining us as always from the Australian Astronomical Observatory is Fred Watson. Hello, Fred.
Hello, Andrew. How are you doing?
I'm quite well, thanks. You've got less space between your ears than I have, I imagine.
I was just thinking, putting those two sentiments together probably means that we both have an infinity of empty space between our ears.
Yes, but
it's a bit like a TARDIS.
The challenge is to fill that space, and that's what we try to do every week. Now, today we're going to be looking at that asteroid again. This is the EXO asteroid that's sort of popped up recently that we know is not of our own solar system. It's come from somewhere else. We're not exactly sure where. But things have developed rather quickly, which is quite unusual in terms of giving it a name. We're going to look at an astroblem. I don't know exactly what an astroblem is, but we'll find out. And pigs in space. Well, not pigs, but all sorts of animals in space. We've just celebrated, or if you want to use that term, I think it's the 70th anniversary of the launch of the first living creature into space, and it was a Siberian husky named Laika. Fred's going to correct me, aren't you?
Well, actually, what we celebrated, you're right, it's at least 70 years ago since we've been launching animals into space. But the critical thing about Laika is that this was the first living creature put into orbit. And it actually was 60 years ago. 60 years ago, a few days ago. So there you go.
Mathematics wasn't my strong point, but
it's okay.
We'll get to that.
It's good enough. It's good enough. That's all right.
Fair enough. Let's talk about this EXO asteroid. This fascinates me, and it fascinates a lot of people, especially astronomers who got very excited about it when it was discovered just a couple of weeks ago. This thing came into our solar system, did a bit of a slingshot, and is headed off to who knows where, but it's not of our solar system, and this is the first time one of these has ever been detected.
Indeed, that's right. So it is, as you said, it's an exoasteroid. It's a great name for it. So what has I guess prompted this story is there's a group within the USA which is actually specializes in basically delineating and enumerating and cataloging all the asteroids, and they use the old name for asteroids. They call them minor planets. Minor planets is what we called asteroids. I guess, the word asteroid was in currency, but minor planet was a much more formal name. Asteroid was always thought to be pretty informal. Yeah. So my MSc thesis is actually titled Practical Techniques for the Determination of Minor Planet Orbits, because that's what I did.
Wow.
That goes back.
I don't even know what that means.
Just means I wrote some computer programs with these new devices called computers, as they were then, to sort out how you determine asteroid orbits. And it's because of that long-standing interest in asteroids and all things to do with minor planets that I'm on the mailing list for the Minor Planet Electronic circulars, and I get sometimes 30 or 40 of them in a day. Every day there are new ones, and they're reporting on the orbits of asteroids which are being observed all around the world. But once in a while, something really interesting comes along, and this one is headlined "Editorial Notice." And I always take notice of editorial notices because they're a bit different from the usual tables of just interminable lists of numbers, which these electronic circulars normally are. And this one is headed "New Designation Scheme for Interstellar Objects," and it goes back exactly to what we were talking about last week, basically the interstellar asteroid, which was given a preliminary designation of A217U1. And I'll explain why that was done in a minute. But the bottom line here is that there has been some email exchanges between the General Secretary of the International Astronomical Union, the President of the Division F of the International Astronomical Union, co-chairs of International Astronomical Union working groups on small body nomenclature, and the Minor Planet Center itself, where these circulars come from, have discussed the issue of what you do about naming things that do not belong to our solar system, but whiz through them from time to time. This is the first one we've recorded that's done that. This object zoomed through the solar system, didn't stop, of course. Its velocity was far too fast to let it be captured by the sun. It zoomed in on a what was called a hyperbolic trajectory and zoomed out on a hyperbolic trajectory, and it's now heading for the constellation of Pegasus, and almost certainly will never ever be seen again. So what do you do about naming things like this? Well, the urgency of the discovery led the group who discovered it, which are based at the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii, basically to adapt the nomenclature that we use for newly discovered asteroids. And that involves, first of all, a year, and that's why this thing's called A217. The A just stands for asteroid, A217. But the U1 bit is because whenever an asteroid is discovered, it has a prefix letter which represents the half month in which the discovery was made. So what they do is they divide the year into 24 half months and give each one a letter. And U is the letter for the first half of November. And of course, that's when it was discovered. U1
this
is the
sounds
first
way too complicated to be normal.
It's the normal routine for asteroids. So I know it sounds bizarre. And then there's a number which is in this case 1, because it's the only one that's been discovered of its kind in the second half of November. First half of November. Yeah, that U designation is a bit weird. It probably goes back 70 or 80 years. I should check on the history of all this. But, I mean, this was the scheme that was in use when I was working on asteroids, and that literally was 50 years ago.
Well, the question that comes straight to my mind is why divide the year into half months? Why not just stick with the months we've got? Or is there some logical reason for that?
It's just so that you don't end up with too big a number. If you discover 1,000 in a month, then the half months you might have 500 in each. It just makes it a little bit easier. And I suspect it was a bit more pragmatic than that, probably, Andrew, because there's 26 letters in the alphabet, and somebody thought,
let's use them all.
We can fit 20. Yeah, let's use them all. Fit in the half months. So it's a half month. So that is the designation that it was given really on the fly when this thing was discovered. So what they are going to do for the temporary designations of anything else that comes in from interstellar space is to follow the same nomenclature. So if another one came in this week, it would be A2 2017 U2. But then you've got so that's the temporary designation given to something before its orbit is firmly analysed, and that's very much the case with asteroids. They get these temporary designations, and then once the orbit is well known and well understood, and there's all the decimal places that you want, it's given a name, which is chosen by the discoverer of the asteroid. In fact, Rob McNaught, one of the most prolific Australian discoverers of asteroids, he named them, a lot of them. Well, one was Siding Spring, I think. Actually, no, that was discovered by somebody else. But you get the idea that you can give the name to it if you discover it. He did call one of them Fred Watson, which was very nice. I'm delighted to have that.
So I was only joking last week about naming one of them Fredoid.
It's Fredoid, yeah. It's asteroid. I can't remember the number. 5691, I think it is in the catalogue, but is also called Fred Watson. Anyway, coming back to the thrust of the matter, so what has now happened is that an object, the permanent designation for an object that whizzes through the solar system is going to have an I attached to it. And I stands for interstellar. And so this one is called 1I because it's the first interstellar object. I don't know whether we'll have a 2I soon. I bet we do, because these things, once you've found one, you tend to find a lot.
Yes.
But
once
it
you know
also
what you're
now,
looking for, yeah.
That's right, exactly. It also now has a name because the team that discovered it at the Pan-STARRS Observatory in Haleakala on the island of Maui in Hawaii has chosen a name for it which is of Hawaiian origin.
Not surprising.
And in fact, their summary is it's of Hawaiian origin and reflects the way this object is like a scout or messenger sent from the distant past to reach out to us. So its name is Oumuamua. And the OU means reach out, and mua, and the second mua makes it emphatic because that's how they do it in the Hawaiian language. It means the first or in advance of. So Oumuamua means the first scout reaching out to us. It's a great name.
It's
fabulous.
Lovely. Yeah, good thinking, just for once.
Very much, yeah, that's right. But very much along the line
these
of
half-month designations.
Yes,
have still got me, a little confused, and it must be really difficult for Hawaiians because they only have 12 letters in their alphabet.
That is true. There are missing letters. That's right.
Yeah.
So the working language of astronomy is English, and we have 26 letters.
Fair enough.
That's why it's done. Yeah, but just to stress again, that half-month thing is actually the temporary designation. It's what you designate something immediately after you've found it, because really the only thing you know about it with certainty at that time is when it was discovered. You know it's an asteroid probably or whatever, but you don't know its orbit well enough to give it a permanent designation. So that is the temporary designation. But the permanent designation is it a number like 5691 and a name like Fred Watson for the for an asteroid that's been permanently put in the register. So we now have the situation where this interstellar interloper has a permanent name and a number. It is called 1I Oumuamua. That's its formal name, as it will always be known by.
Fantastic. And I think we just broke the world record for telling a story when all we really needed to say was they stuck an eye on it. But it's good news, though. Good news. And I'm stunned that they sorted it out so fast. That was amazing.
It's not bad, is it? No, it's
pretty good. Pretty good. You're listening to Space Nuts with Andrew Dunkley and Fred Watson. Now, let's take a little break and find out more about our sponsor, ExpressVPN, rated #1 by Tech Radar. This is the one I use. I've been using it for a couple of years and I love it. When I joined ExpressVPN, they were brand new to the market, but I read a lot of reviews and did a lot of comparisons. And there was just something about their business model that I particularly liked. And a couple of years down the track, honestly, can't complain. Their interface is very easy to use. Their service is second to none. I've had to contact them a couple of times about certain things that I wanted to do, and they were brilliant. So you may be wondering why I do need a VPN at all. It's all about privacy. Do you really want big tech companies, governments and others knowing what's going on with your online activity? Even if you're having nothing to hide, it just feels downright creepy. I think you'll agree. And governments are getting more and more interested in what you're doing every day. And so, protecting your privacy is what VPN is all about. And how often do you run across websites that you want to get information from only to find that they're geo-blocked? This is becoming an increasing problem, but ExpressVPN solves that problem for you. Now, if you go to our special URL, you'll see quite a list of things this service can help you with, things you may never have thought of before. As I say, it's the one I use, secure, fast, and it just works. So protect yourself online today and find out more about how to get 3 months free at tryexpressvpn.com/space. That's tryexpressvpn.com/space for 3 months free with a 1-year package. Try expressvpn.com/space to learn more, and you'll find the link details in the show notes and on our website. Now, back to the show.
Roger, you're loud and clear here also.
Space nuts.
Now, Fred, we're going to look at something that, if you say the word, people are going to go, huh? And the word is astroblem, or astrobleem as it is written, but we think it's a blem. This has got something to do with some core drilling that's been going on, and they've been digging up rocks and looking at them, and they have found one of these things, I assume.
Indeed, that's right. So the word itself, you get the clue from other words. Astroblem or astrobleem, as it looks to us. I'm not, I think you pronounce it as you like. Really, depends which school you went to, probably. It means literally. Well, astro is to do with stars, so star, and a blem is a scar. It's like a blemish. That's where the word blemish comes from. So an astroblem is a star scar, and it's actually basically just means whatever's left by something that's hit the Earth. And we're now talking about, once again, asteroids or meteorites. So if you've got an asteroid that comes in, hits the Earth, and alters its geology, then the resulting geological features are called astroblems.
Ah.
So that's what this is.
It's all pretty boring, really, isn't it?
When it comes to the crunch, most things are, Andrew. No, that's not true. Nobody could say that what we do is boring. Well, they could, but I do remember the first book I wrote, one of the reviews said, "This is as exciting as watching paint dry."
Oh, no. Is that where that phrase came from? Oh, dear.
It is, yeah. So I thought, well, okay, never mind. But I don't think
That's all right.
generally is particularly boring.
I read a review about my book recently, and they said, "Gee, should have got a better proofreader."
Well, that's a fair criticism.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'll
No,
cop
it's
that.
all right. No, it's not. So this is to do actually. Let me just step back a minute. So an astroblem covers everything from, just a small dip in the ground to something the size of the Chicxulub crater that we've talked about a lot, which is where the 12-kilometer or 15-kilometer diameter asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs hit in the Gulf of Mexico. That you could call an astroblem, but we usually would call it a crater. But the astroblem that's causing attention at the moment is a rather special one. It's in France. It's in a place called Rochechouart. Or Rochechouart is probably the way the locals pronounce it, which is in central France. It's a little town that has basically this unusual rock feature, and which we now know is basically caused by the impact of an asteroid, but small asteroid, big enough to do damage. But it's very old. It's much, much older than the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. That, if you remember, was 66 million years ago. This one's more than 200 million years ago. And actually, it's been known for well over 100 years, probably more like 150 years, to have a sort of extraterrestrial origin, or at least to be something special.
Yeah.
I think it's probably more recently than that. And so it's been a magnet for scientists, geologists, exobiologists, astrobiologists, the people who look at signs of life from space, paleontologists, people who look at fossils and things. And basically they've come to this place because the remnants, the geological evidence is very close to the surface. That's why it's so special. It's basically, you don't have to dig. It's
to the bottom of the Gulf
of
of Mexico, for example.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I think they only went down about 1,400 meters, but it's still a long way.
Yeah.
When the Myrtle drilling rig drilled into the Gulf of Mexico, but with this one in Rochua, you don't need to. You just kind of hit the rock with a hammer
off the top.
Yeah, that's right.
So they've been doing some core drilling.
That's indeed the case
on this outcrop. Did they find anything?
Well, I think that's what the story really leads to. There is there clearly have been drilling. We've got some nice photographs of core samples and things of that sort. But what's happening now is that is all being analysed. So, for example, you've got people there, basically meteoritic specialists, who are trying to get the details of how, and these are chemical details largely, from the analysis of the rock, of how meteorites like this form and how they evolve in space, because we think that asteroids in particular are really the leftover debris of the formation of the solar system. So there's all that sort of thing. And then there are people looking, the astrobiologists are looking for evidence of there being sort of organic materials that have come in on this space rock, because some people think that the organic materials, these are the carbon-containing compounds, some of them quite complex, actually seeded life on Earth. If you've got these these complex molecules that are prerequisites for life, and they're dumped on Earth by asteroids, well, that might be what kicked off life here. We don't know the answer to that, but this is the kind of work that scientists are doing. And there's there's all sorts of other scientific work going on, like how much of the life in the surrounding area was destroyed by this impact, because it probably damaged the environment for, well, more than 100 kilometers all around, probably more like 200 or 300 kilometers. This is a 1 kilometer sized object, which is a big one. It's big enough to do at least nationwide damage and probably continent-wide damage as well.
Wow,
so
amazing.
An interesting story. And what's exciting about it is, as I said, this thing's right on the surface. So people are talking about setting up open-air laboratories above it and things of that sort. It's great stuff.
Yeah, indeed. And so there'll be more to learn, and we may be able to talk about that down the track. So
I think so, yeah. And I think it's almost a sort of public service that they're doing here, because they're doing they're drilling the rock cores, and then they're making available to scientists everywhere, rather than keeping it all to themselves and doing the analysis. They're basically putting them out to research groups all around the world. So we might, it's going to be probably a couple of years, but we might get some really interesting results from this.
Fascinating. Okay, we'll watch with interest. You're with Andrew Dunkley and Fred Watson, and you're listening to Space Nuts.
3, 2, 1.
Space Nuts.
Finally, Fred, we're going to look at the issue of animals in space. Now, we can go back 60 years, and we've just recently passed the 60th anniversary of the launch of Laika, which was a Siberian husky that the Russians put into space. It did a lap of the Earth, and then the batteries ran out, and, well, Laika was no more. And we have since been sending chimps and rats and mice and even ants and bees and all sorts of other critters into space. We seem to have a need to do this. There are good reasons to. Early on it was because of the risk, and you didn't want to send a person up, so you sent a dog. But it is still a rather fascinating part of the entire space race concept, isn't it?
That's right. And of course, it's controversial as well.
Yes,
because
indeed.
We live in an era now where animal life is much more valued than perhaps it was back then in the early days of the space age. But it has to be said, Andrew, at the outset, that it's because animals were sent into space. It saved probably dozens of human lives because of what was learned by flying animals in space. It would have been probably fairly, a humanitarian crime to do the same with humans, because we really didn't know what would happen to people when they went into space in the early days. Nowadays, we take it completely for granted. We've got the guys on the space station. We've got a lot of medical research that goes on. But in the early days, nobody knew whether it would be instant death from the radiation. And so it was very much in the post-war period. And I think the earliest flight with animals was something like 1947. This very early on, they used animals to act as basically as canaries, like the coal mines. The canary in the coal mine dies when you've got methane or whatever, and warns people that you're in a poisonous environment. I suppose the same thing was true with animal life in space, to check whether we would survive. In fact, the first time animals were sent, they were fruit flies.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and it was 1947, as I said. It was basically up to a height of about 100 kilometers in what was actually then the standard way of doing space experiments. It was basically a Nazi V-2 rocket that didn't make it in as a missile. The V-2, of course, the vengeance weapon that Hitler launched right at the end of the Second World War. A lot of them were unused and formed the basis of experiments that were carried on post-war by the Allies, principally in America. So that experiment first, rockets sent up to 100 kilometers, fruit flies, and then there were actually a lot of monkeys were sent. In the 50s. NASA didn't come into being until 1958, so NASA didn't exist until after the Laika experiment. But yes, in the wake, very quickly after the first successful orbiting satellite, which was Sputnik 1 in October 1957. Within a couple of weeks of that, Sputnik 2 had been launched, which had a capsule containing this dog, Laika, which was in fact a stray.
Yes, so I believe.
Picked up from the streets of Moscow.
Oh, here's a dog. He'll do, mate.
Yeah, except it was a she.
Oh, right.
And there's a reason why they preferred female dogs, and that's because they don't have to lift their leg to pee, so you can put them in a smaller space.
Seriously?
In the capsule. That's right. And that came from people who worked on there's actually let me see if I can find it. Yes, a Russian biologist whose name is and I think she's still around, Adilya Kotovskaya. Adilya Kotovskaya. She helped to train Laika, and she said those 9 orbits of Earth made Laika the world's first cosmonaut.
Fantastic.
Sacrificed for the sake of success of future space missions.
It's a great achievement with a very, very tragic ending because, I've read stories that suggest that the life support batteries ran out and that's why Laika died, but there are other stories that suggest that it was an issue of overheating in the capsule. I don't know which one to believe.
I've heard the overheating one as well. I think the mechanics of making an environment suitable for a living organism were totally in their infancy in 1957. So it's not surprising that the air conditioning failed and Laika overheated and died. I actually am not sure if that hadn't happened, whether Laika would have been able to be recovered anyway. I don't know what the re-entry setup was for this spacecraft. But yeah, very interesting stuff. It wasn't the first dog that they sent into space, though. In August 1960, a couple of dogs actually that did come back alive flew on what's called a suborbital flight. They went up and then down again. They were successful. Yeah, very interesting. 1968. This is well into the space age. There was a spacecraft sent by the Soviet Union to orbit the moon that apparently carried tortoises, among other things. So, it seems a bit strange to put some of the slowest animals.
Well, they carry their own helmets, so I suppose that was, logical.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Indeed, they do. They just tuck their heads in. I mean, now we're in an era where you would not do it. The big question, I guess, is that we are really on the verge within the next perhaps 2 decades of sending humans to Mars. And I suppose the question then is, well, do you want to do it with a primate or an animal that could help us understand what the effect on humans will be? That's an ethical question that has yet to be answered, because the climate now is one that would really that would actually dictate against that. There's a science an animal rights group called PETA, and their science policy advisor is basically is an advocate for not doing that. She says animals aren't astronauts, and unlike human volunteers, can't give their consent to being the subject of experiments or to risking their lives on a frightening mission into the unknown. So
that said, they also can't give their consent to be slaughtered and eaten. So
exactly.
Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, this is an area that, of course, is very, very. It's a very, very messy area, one that whether the ethics are ill-defined, and I'm absolutely with you on that comment. So at least we know there are no more primate tests, because NASA has already said that it will not do that, as has the European Space Agency. Actually, that's not true. There are apparently, I was going to say that's not true. In Russia, we think that there might still be plans to use experiments with primates in Russia, but we don't really know too much about that. So NASA has said that, as I said a few minutes ago, if you didn't have animal testing in the early days of spaceflight, there could have been big losses of human life. But NASA's gone on to say these animals performed a service to their respective countries that no human could or would have performed. They gave their lives in their service in the name of technological advancement, paving the way for humanity's many forays into space.
Now, I just wonder, I'm just thinking, and it just popped into my head, but is there a monument for Laika? Did they?
I believe there is.
Yeah, I thought there was.
That's right. Yes. I'm not sure where it is, but I can imagine.
I'm going to say Russia.
I would guess it is, and maybe even Moscow.
And the first chimpanzee in space was named Ham.
That's right, Ham. Yeah. And I think he flew on a Mercury capsule, which was the one that was the first American manned capsule. I think Ham flew in one of the early Mercury.
Pretty
flights.
sure he came back.
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah. And of course, we still are sending animals into space for experimental purposes.
On the space station, yeah.
We once discussed an experiment where they sent up spiders to see how they'd react to zero-G while spinning webs or something to that effect, which I believe was an idea of Australian school students, unless I'm crossing my wires. But so we're still doing it, but for more positive purposes.
Maybe so. Yeah, it's a tricky issue.
It is indeed, yeah. All right. Fred, as always, interesting, fascinating, exciting and fun. Thank you so much.
A great pleasure, Andrew. Good to talk again, and we'll speak again soon.
We will indeed. That's Fred Watson from the Australian Astronomical Observatory. And don't forget to send us your questions via Facebook. We love to hear from you. Just look up Space Nuts in your Facebook search engine, and don't forget to like us. You don't have to like us, just like us, if that makes any sense. And tell your friends about us, and we will get together again in the not too distant future, maybe a light year or more. That's not time anyway. And catch you again on the podcast known as Space Nuts.
Space Nuts. You've been listening to the Space Nuts podcast.
Mission complete, Houston.
Subscribe to the full podcast on iTunes, Audio Boom and Stitcher, or your favourite podcast distributor. This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.